And these collections, of course, were founded as discrete institutions with their own endowments and have throughout their history benefited from both the deep coffers of these universities and the largesse of wealthy donors. In contrast, the Walsh Gallery and other small museum collections, which are far more numerous and exist in 2- and 4-year colleges alike, are often much more ad hoc, formed through a mixture of happenstance and the dedication of certain key individuals who hold a wealth of institutional knowledge. When those individuals either move along to new institutions or pass on, that institutional knowledge is often lost. This lack of continuity, paired with limited resources to support staff and collections care, results in these collections going unseen and unused. And of course, the whole point of university collections is that they're a resource for students, faculty, for teaching. In some cases, these objects are forgotten entirely. Collections that could and should be vital resources for students, faculty, and researchers are instead hidden away in cardboard boxes and storage closets, sometimes for decades. So after this kind of long preamble, I'm going to present my case for the importance and potential of these forgotten university art collections by focusing on one such collection at the Walsh, the Wang Fangyu collection of Asian art. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the collection's history, about Wang Fangyu himself, and about some ongoing research that my colleagues and I have been doing over the past year. So first, a very short, and I promise short, history of the Walsh Gallery and its collections. The Walsh Gallery was officially founded in 1994 with the establishment of the gallery space in the newly built Walsh Library, which you see here. For decades previously, however, Seton Hall had presented exhibitions of art and artifacts in various repurposed spaces across campus. Various departments had their own collections of art and artifacts. In particular, the art department and the anthropology and archaeology departments both had their own collections that were housed in the buildings in which they had classes, their professors' offices, etc. In the 1960s, a professor named Herbert Kraft founded the Seton Hall Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. By his death in 2000, Kraft had amassed over 20,000 artifacts. Most of these were Indigenous American artifacts, really from across the country. But Kraft wanted the collection to be a sort of complete overview of global art across time. So the collection also includes art and artifacts from Asia, Africa, the Middle East, basically anywhere you can think of. In 2015, the collection was moved to the Walsh Gallery, where it was inventoried and objects were partially rehoused. And I should have added before this that these images you see in front of you are these kind of pop-up exhibitions that Kraft would stage in various university buildings. I believe this is him in the top right there. So again, it was moved in 2015 to the Walsh Gallery, and the objects are currently, even now, 10 layers later, more than 10, being inventoried, researched, and these objects have been largely off view as the gallery continues the legally mandated work of repatriating objects to various Indian tribes. As you can see, in the top right over here, the collection does include some human remains and some funerary objects. So under federal law, these have to be repatriated along with associated other objects. So the same general period also saw the founding of another collection, the Wang Fangyu collection of Asian art, which was originally under the auspices of the art department and housed in the art center. If anybody is familiar with Seton Hall, the art center is this beautiful old carriage house that, again, very lovely, but it is not at all temperature controlled, humidity controlled, any of the kind of conditions we like to store art. Wang Fangyu emigrated from China in 1945 and taught Mandarin Chinese at Yale before joining the Seton Hall University's Department of Asian Studies in 1965. But Wang was also devoted to the practice and history of traditional Chinese brush painting. Here he is here doing calligraphy. He was a devoted calligrapher who exhibited widely in the United States and China. This is one of his works on the right. And on the far left, these catalogs, Dancing Ink, are catalogs of exhibitions that he took part in. He paired his artistic practice with in-depth scholarship on the history of Chinese art. In particular, he was an authority on the 17th century painter Bada Shanren or Zhu Da. In the middle, you see The Master of the Lotus Garden, The Life and Art of Bada Shanren was published in 1990. He co-authored this book, which is still some 35 years later, the authoritative text on the artist. So importantly, Wang also amassed the largest collection of paintings by Bada Shanren in private hands, which is no small feat for a university professor. So in the early 1970s, Wang founded the Asian Art Collection at Seton Hall, and many collectors, artists, and scholars in the US and across the world donated artworks in his honor. By his retirement in 1978, the collection comprised over 250 objects dating from the 1st century BCE to the 20th century. After the move, it seems that a partial inventory was completed and some objects were photographed and cataloged in our collections management system. But most of the objects were simply rehoused in archival boxes like the ones you see here. And here are just a few of the many, many scrolls in the collection, which I will talk about in a minute. So I in no way want to downplay the huge effort it took to relocate and store these objects. What's more, at the time, the decision not to fully catalog the collection seems to have resulted from the dissemination of some very incorrect information about its history. Again, this is in about 2014, when these objects were moved from the Art Center to the Walsh. So several decades after the collection was first founded. So this information is worth spending a minute explaining because it's a good example of the kind of game of telephone that often occurs at institutions, and that sometimes leads to valuable resources being overlooked or totally forgotten or lost. After Wang's death in 1997, most of his personal collection was gifted to the Smithsonian's Freer Gallery, which is part of the Asian Art Museum, and a few objects were given to Seton Hall. On the left is a catalog of a 2003 exhibition that showcased Wang Fangyu's gift of Bada Shanren paintings, and there have been other exhibitions in the interceding years as well. However, over time, it seems that this personal collection, which again mostly went to the Freer, and the Wang Fangyu collection at Seton Hall became conflated. As far as I can tell, Walsh Gallery staff assumed that the artworks they had moved from the Art Center were the dregs of Wang's personal collection. That is, that they were second and third-rate objects that weren't good enough for the Freer. So because of this, there wasn't much impetus to really do a full inventory of these objects when they arrived at the gallery. This is my understanding. Of course, other factors like being short-staffed, not having the resources, all other things could have affected this decision as well. But the fact remains that by the time I arrived at Seton Hall, most of the collection had been sitting kind of mostly untouched in storage for about a decade. And I should note that even when it was housed in the Art Center, these works of art were not used. They were in a storage cabinet in a room that was rarely used for classes. And so they were kind of sitting there for decades, all in all. So when we began unpacking, condition checking, and photographing the objects, it soon became apparent that these weren't the Freer's cast-offs. Many of these objects are really wonderful and rare works of art in their own right, and also have been really fantastic for teaching, which again is the point of our collections. For instance, there is a huge group of ceramics from China and Japan, mainly some from Korea, including porcelain figures, inkstands, various vessels, again, dating from BC to 20th century AD. A group of Chinese export porcelain from the 17th to 19th centuries has been particularly useful for discussing cultural exchange during the Age of Exploration through the 19th century. It's been really fascinating to see students kind of try to imagine a time before photography and social media, when perhaps the only image somebody living in the United States had of people living in China existed on their tableware, like this Femme Rose picture on the right. And just because it's one of my favorite discoveries that we made this year and one of my favorite objects in the collection, here are two paintings from a 10 painting series called 100 Drinkers in Fairyland. So this series takes us through a day or a week or a month, who knows, experienced by these 100 scholars who are in this magical place, getting totally drunk, as you can see here. And they're surrounded by these really fantastical, lovely animals everywhere. It's really great and particularly kind of apt for a university, I think. So perhaps most importantly and surprisingly, the Wang Fangyu collection also includes over 60 Chinese scroll paintings dating from the 12th to the 19th century. Well, it seems that many of these scrolls hadn't been unfurled in several decades. The gallery had cataloged and photographed a few of them over the years. One of the great jewels of this collection, and an object that the gallery was definitely aware of, is a scroll by Bada Shanren, who, of course, was the kind of object of obsession for Wang Fangyu. This scroll has been in Cleveland, being conserved for the past year, when will return to us in just a few weeks, which is really exciting. I've never seen it in person. But as we are looking through the scrolls, we discovered other museum quality works by famous artists. Now, I should note that these works have not been appraised by authority on Chinese painting, but several have provenance records and appraisal records that suggest they are authentic. For instance, we have works by Dai Qie, Xu Tao, and Mi Fei or Mi Fu, three of kind of the great figures in Chinese painting history. And it is with the scrolls that a more complete story about the Wang Fangyu collection takes shape. The Wang Fangyu collection's documentation is surprisingly complete. Each object has an associated object file that records details about the donor, the object itself, its history, its provenance. Oddly, while the files associated with these ceramics are nearly empty, the object files for the scrolls are full of letters and other documents from the artists and collectors who donated them. Together, these records offer a glimpse at the large network of Chinese artists, collectors, and scholars who were forced to leave mainland China after the Communist Party took power in 1949. The collection also brings to light how, after settling for the most part in either Taiwan or the US, they cultivated ties with one another and their homeland by creating and collecting art. And this kind of network and how we can visualize this network through the Wang Fangyu collection is the focus of an exhibition that we're presenting at the Walsh Gallery in the fall. So, for instance, several of the scrolls, and apologies for these kind of lousy pictures, we are still very much making our way through the collection and photographing it. It's a slow process. So several of the scrolls in the collection were either created or donated by members of a large circle of Chinese expats living in New York and New Jersey. This group included Wang Jian, who founded the New York School of Chinese Brushwork in 1947, which was a really vital kind of way to transmit this knowledge in the United States. Also represented is C.C. Wang, one of the most famous Chinese ink painters living and working in the US in the 1970s and 1980s. Wang Fangyu was close friends with both of these artists and exhibited alongside them. Many of these artists, as you can see, with the C.C. Wang scroll to the right, I think, combined kind of traditional techniques with Western influences. So their work is a really interesting expression of the in-between state of being a displaced person. The gallery's collection also reaches beyond the tri-state area and speaks to the national and international network of Chinese immigrant artists who were displaced after the 1949 Civil War. This work was created in collaboration by 6 artists who are part of a community of Chinese artists living in Los Angeles, including Zhang Baihan and Wu Wanhui. This work was donated by the prominent New York-based practitioner and teacher of calligraphy, Dr. Don Cheng, and it really reflects the close community ties between Chinese expat artists. The painter Chang Kunyan was also forced to move to Taiwan after the political turmoil of 1949. In Taiwan, he became a key figure in the Seven Friends Painting Society, a pioneering Taiwanese art group established to promote modern art and foster artistic community. And we have some really lovely letters of him. This is him in a photograph that he sent to Wang Fangyu on the lower right. And the collection also tells the fascinating story of Chinese Catholics after 1949. Like Wang, several of the artists represented in the collection were Roman Catholics who are part of the mass migration of Christian religious communities from mainland China after 1949. Wu Wanhui, one of the artists who created the New Year's scroll that we just saw, also was forced to flee, first to Taipei and later to the US because of her faith. Perhaps the most interesting portal into this topic is a scroll painting that was housed with the Wang Fangyu collection for decades, but as we discovered only in the past few weeks, has a unique life story all of its own. And I wanted to end with this work because it's an amazing work of art in its own right, and because it's a really good example of the kind of treasures that I suspect are kind of lurking in university art collections across the country. So when we first came upon this scroll, it was within all of the group of scrolls in the Wang Fangyu collection. But immediately we realized that it did not belong because of these 2 clues. So one is this number 2409, and the other is this little tag it had, which says Shoe Museum H Craft. So we immediately knew that this scroll was also actually part of the Kraft collection, again, formed by Herbert Kraft in the 1960s as kind of a omnibus world collection. So it made a little bit of sense that this Chinese object would be in the Kraft collection. So these clues led us to this card. Kraft included all of the information about every object in his collection. Again, 20,000 some objects on these little index cards, these file cards. And so we learned that this object, the scroll, is called Bamboo and Leaf Scene with Poem by Chiang Dai-shing. And he's identified as a famous living Formosan artist, and it's from about 1930. So using this information, we are able to go back into the files, and after several days of searching, we found this gift record, and we learned that the scroll was part of a group of objects given to the university and given to Herbert Kraft by somebody named Bonaventure Kuo. So a little digging revealed that Bonaventure Kuo was a priest in Newark. He was born in 1914 to a Catholic family, and was ordained as a priest in 1935. He was born in China. Like Wang Fangyu, he attended the Catholic University in Beijing. We have this really lovely little blueprint that shows the main building of the Catholic University. In 1949, Kuo escaped, and I should add that he barely escaped. He actually witnessed his uncle being murdered in the streets, but he did amazingly manage to escape. He went first to Taiwan, and then he came in 1950 to the US and became assistant pastor at St. Mary's Abbey Church in Newark. His primary role there seems to have been ministering to the community of Chinese Catholic expats. So he is an envoy to his countrymen in New Jersey, as this article says. And Kuo died in February 1962 when he was quite young. And there, of course, his estate, or some of his estate at least, was given to Seton Hall. So this scroll raises another question. Is Cheng Da-shing, which is how it's spelled on the card, and he's identified again as a famous living Formosan artist, really Cheng Daishan, who is also known as Zhang Daiquan? So Zhang Daiquan is a fascinating figure. I encourage you to look further into him. But he was born in 1899 in China to a Catholic family. Like Bonaventure Kuo, he left China in 1949. By 1952, he was living in Argentina and then in Brazil and California. After a long career, he died in Taiwan in 1983. He is considered one of the most important Chinese artists of the 20th century. And this is more of a side note, although I could do a whole presentation on this aspect of his life. He is also regarded as one of the most talented forgers of the 20th century. So there are many, probably hundreds of objects in museum collections, amazingly well-respected collections that have discovered that objects they thought were 15th century paintings are actually forgeries by Zhang Daiquan. These paintings are still being discovered today, amazingly. Here he is with Picasso. He was really kind of a public figure who led a sort of a flamboyant life. So in closing, this research, especially this research on Bonaventure Kuo and Zhang Daiquan, raises all sorts of really interesting questions, I think, about this relationship between these two figures. Did they know each other? The fact that they were both Catholic, they were from this relatively same place in China, not bordering towns, makes me wonder if they knew each other, what their relationship was, if they had a relationship, and how this scroll got into the hands of this priest who had to flee China and go to Taiwan. So in closing, I just want to emphasize sort of the importance of these university collections and the fact that funding for the arts, for humanities is being slashed all over, and these important resources are really some of the first things to be forgotten because of these cuts. So I hope I've made my case for why these hidden, forgotten treasures are really important, both to sort of culture in general, but also to the universities and the education people are receiving in them. So that is my presentation. Thank you so much.